It's my joy to welcome you to this delightful discussion with Marja and Jane Affleck. Jane is an Alexander teacher and physiotherapist. Let's join in.
Summers come and summers go. This one's very special though. Let go of what you think you know, and you can put a kiss upon a toe.
Yes.
Here you are, ladies. Welcome.
Thank you. How are you, Lisa?
I'm fine. How are you both?
Well, we have this killer storm coming up, so we are waiting for, the huge storm. So exciting.
Okay.
But thank you, Jane, being here with us today. And for all the audience, I will reveal that I am probably not the only one who has in this world good ideas. Anyone who's been in my energy workshops or the little notes I'm sending, I will need to believe there are some inspirations behind me. So there are other people who have good ideas too. So lovely to have you here, Jane.
Thank you very much.
And Jane has a really wonderful big life, and what I feel there are rarely people who share their energy and their understanding. And every time you do share your understanding, things will have a new value. Please, Jane.
Thank you. I can't see you, but I can feel that you're there. Some of you, I am 72, so I'm speaking, I imagine, to all ages. But there was a song by the Beatles, and it was called A Day in the Life. Fantastic music, and very much of my time in the 60s. You may remember the song, some of you. But this today is more of my life in 15 minutes. So I'm going to share with you the journey that I was on that led me to today in the work that I have accomplished.
Okay, that is so wonderful. But I can't wait to hear the story, because your story really includes from a mimes to the lipstick. So I think it's kind of very hard to put you in a 15 minutes. Please, where did you all start?
Well,
it's all very much on the body.
yes,
It's like a interlinking that pairing with everything.
that's right. That's right. I mean, I was obviously born in the UK, and I grew up in the north part, and had a very happy childhood. I was an only child, born late to my parents after the war, and my early days were wearing hand-me-down clothes if you could get them, and there was a lot of rationing still. That was my early days. I don't really remember them, but people talked about them a lot. And so I moved on through my life. I went to school. I went to a convent. What my father never let the nuns know was actually I wasn't a Roman Catholic. So when everybody came to be having their first communion, I was the one child who never had her first communion.
My goodness me.
But it was an interesting, and I loved it, and I loved the nuns, and I felt they came over at the time of the war. So that was a very good time for me growing up. And then I was going on to secondary school, which you do there here in the UK, sort of when you turn 11. Then, of course, I found that my father hadn't really given my right age, so I couldn't do it because I was only 10. So they said, the nuns, well, you've now got to stay 2 more years, and then you'll catch up. My father said, I'm not having her stay 2 more years, and they said, you'll have to. That was sort of the way my life started. So I did the 2 years, and then I went on to boarding school, not far away, and a lot of the young girls from Newcastle, where I lived, they also went to boarding school. It was very much the thing that you did.
In the UK.
In the UK.
Yes. Our dog.
Your dog is joining in.
Go ahead.
So there I was at boarding school, and because I'd come late, they wanted to put me down to the year level. No, my father said, you will go up to where you should be. If you can't manage it, fair enough. So all this was taken for granted. I felt very secure in my growing up, and when I left, I had met somebody, I was still at school, who then became my husband. So the end of my training at school was a little bit here and there because I was not really concentrating on my work. But anyway, I had decided that I wanted to become a physiotherapist, passionately wanted to be a physiotherapist.
Tell about the interview. I think
So-
it was so in era.
So we're talking now 1968, and my father had to take me to the interview. You weren't allowed to go on your own in those days. You went to the hospital, you went to the right part. When Miss Bowler was waiting for you, she was the director, and she questioned my father. I just sat there, and then at the end she said, "Can I look at your hands?" And I put my hands out. She said, "We accept you." And
So
that was
your father was interviewed.
Yes,
not you.
not me, not at all.
I think that's wonderful.
That was again very much the way it was.
Yes.
And then I started 3 years training there at a very big hospital in Newcastle in the north, and they were having such carefree, wonderful days.
Yeah.
And a lot of the friends I made there, I still have. And I qualified from there, actually, particularly successfully, because I came to one of the top people in the country. But that was only because they asked me the questions that I knew, because I was obsessed with certain parts of the curriculum. So then I got married, and
You must tell about the minus.
oh yes,
Oh, you must tell about
Oh,
that.
yes,
That's
yes.
really
Oh,
important
yes.
because you were
And
so
then-
young and you
I
had
was.
you were very first kind of occupational therapist.
I was
weren't you?
well while I was working training. There were a lot of big coal mines all around us, and part of my training was to go out to where the miners who'd had injuries would go every week to these big houses, old country houses, which were set aside by the National Health for them to get better. Is it? So I would go there every morning in the bus about 6 o'clock in the morning, walk up the long drive, and there I was for the rest of the day.
But you also went physically.
And
In
there,
the mines,
yes, you trained.
yes.
You had. They wouldn't sort of obey you unless you had been down their mines.
Yeah.
So, as a very young girl, I had these big helmets, and I go down the mines, see where they were. They were very hot. You often were in a barrow for a long time, going along under the ground. Only once did I go out under the sea, which I did find quite alarming, but actually it was fine. My parents were sort of pretty well, had no idea of what I was doing.
But you were also teaching them.
Oh yes, and then
other
I teach them,
exercises,
and then that's right. So
Yeah.
back in the big house, beautiful house, there would be a group for the hands, people who had bad hand injuries, people who had bad leg injuries, and then another group to just get everyone together. And I had to be there in the morning by 6:30 because they were up, and we played then. I stood on a big big box, and they were all around me, and then I had to wake them up by playing a game called in the UK Simon Says, which is when you do lots of movements and they have to follow you, and then you do ones like this and they miss out, and then they're out. And then they complained. Oh,
So it's a
because
children's game,
It was
isn't it?
a children's game. They love that. They love that. And that was the start to our day. And then we would work in all the different groups. And then we would have games when in the big house, the big rooms, they would swing one of the big doors towards you. You were on a chair and you had to prove how good you were by jumping from your chair onto and holding the top of this.
Generally, I must ask this. This is occupational health. Do they do it nowadays?
No, they wouldn't be allowed. They wouldn't be allowed to do the things I did.
What do you think, Lisa? Still not doing it.
They wouldn't be allowed. So I loved all my training, and by one fluke, there was one part of my training that I absolutely loved, which was how your body really worked. So when I came to do my finals, I was very successful. And because of that, I was then got married, and we moved to London. I was able to be transferred to a very, very good job, training still, obviously, in a hospital that was really for neurological. It was a neurological hospital. You didn't really get many people who'd been in the war. They were immediate things that were going on, and some people were coming from abroad. And I worked there, and it was such a good experience. And I was with a very, very good teacher. He was the first man who ran the Minute Mile. He's very famous. He was very famous. And he was sort of worshipped, actually, by people in the hospital. But he was. I got onto his team, and it was a great privilege. And I worked there for quite some time until I started to have my 2 children.
That's really so. The neurological kind of experience, you went to the very difficult people then, and then you were introduced to Alexander tea.
Yes, and then I had been reading and knowing about something called the Alexander technique, which was started by Alexander himself before the war. He came over from Australia, and he started working on people in a very different way. Touching their bodies, thinking about their bodies inside, not just you've got a bad arm, let's strap it up and it'll get better. I was fascinated by it. And I never met him, he had died in the early 50s. But a man called Walter Carrington, who had worked with him and who was amazing, I was lucky enough, by the skin of my teeth, to be accepted by him. And all the things in that story, this is what really changed my life. It was a big house in London, very smart. He lived in the top, and he had, most of us were British pupils, but some came from abroad. And it was heaven. And I learned then what it was like to have to be touched, to move, to how your body moved, but from the inside out, and to get the flow.
I think maybe audience doesn't know the story about Alexander. This is what I've understood. Because one of the reasons why I came to London was because of the fact that there was hardly anybody working in Finland when I started. So when I came here, I felt, I come home. So I feel like Alexander made Feldenkrais, Laban,
and Feldenkrais,
all of them together made like an era already that was existing here. So when you come here in the 1990s, it was kind of piece of cake to do body work. And but his story, what I read very early, was that it was all about neck, and he lost his speech, wasn't it? And that's when he realized that when his posture is different, the voice changes.
He was an actor.
Yes.
And he was a touring actor, in Australia. But he found, although he was getting very well known and famous, he got anxious because he would dry up in the middle of a performance. And so he spent about 3 years on his own working out what he was doing wrong, or what he wasn't doing. And because of that, he worked out that he was basically tightening up all the time.
Himself. Yeah,
He was
himself.
tightening up. He had no freedom. His breathing was anxious, and
Yeah.
slowly he worked through that. He discovered that he could act quite freely, but he thought, this is so exciting, and I think I would like to go to England and see if I can help people there.
And ever since, thousands of actors been helped,
Yes.
performers, speakers, you know, been helped by
Yes,
Alexander.
because Walter Carrington was one of his, worked with him. When I worked with him, he was just in his 70s. That's when I moved and was with Walter in the big house and trained by him.
Just something you brought up in a way that you instantly, it was a love between the physiotherapy and
Yes.
the working with the big men and making difference in their well-being, and you used the word that you felt, this is where I belong.
I did. This is where I should be.
And I feel like that summarizes you, that you are able to choose something that wasn't quite so usual.
Very unusual.
Very. So you're here again.
Most of my friends were doing quite simply.
Say no more. But anyway, you talk about this inside out and these sort of affirmations. You brought them with you ever since I met you. They are part of your life.
Yes.
Not only the physical work, but anyway, you felt that this is where I belong. So describe us a little bit of the house you were in.
Well,
how much work you did every single day for 3 years.
for three years,
Yes.
it was this, you had the new students, we were probably in a group of just 4 of us, each group, you know, and we would work in the mornings in this most lovely room with all amazing sort of friezes round and books, and Walter himself had his sort of place where he saw people individually just on the other side. So we would be there every morning during the week. We'd start at 9:30 and we would work. We'd have a little break in the middle, but we were working really on lying down in certain ways, semi-supine lying down, learning just to know our bodies.
You have a picture of Walter.
Walter?
Yes, so we have a look, Lisa, for that. And he believed in touch. Alexander
He believed in touch.
That you, by touching,
Yes,
there is a muscle memory.
no equipment at
So
all.
who is in this picture? So
Well, that is,
You.
it is on the day that 3 years later when I graduated in the big
you look
role.
so happy and proud.
I was very relieved and happy. And so I'm presenting him with these particular berries that he liked to eat, and I had managed to track down. So he's at the front, and then behind him you can just see his wife, and then one of my colleagues just behind, and then I'm the one who's looking at him. And he was very thrilled. It was a very happy day, and then we all had lunch.
Oh,
Yes.
and you gave him, oh, lovely. That's such a
Yeah,
lovely
he
atmosphere.
was just, fantastic.
But you called it, often say that he was very simple. He
Very
had very
simple.
simple things to do,
Yes.
but he repeated them.
Yes.
He made them as routines, and he repeated them, and he lifted their importance. And one of the things he used to say,
the one thing that was he was very almost amused but very interested in. He said, there's something missing about you. Can you just do some crawling for me? So I did this crawling, and he said, did you ever walk before you crawled? Do you remember? I said, no, I never did. I never crawled. I never walked. I just crawled everywhere. And he said, yes, but your crawling is sort of very baby-like. And he said, I think we're going to work on your crawling because then a lot of the other stuff will be released. This is holding you back.
So could you really say that neurological studies, this was a missing link?
It was,
Really,
for me, every link was missing.
So you had to...
Yes, because those things they show. You haven't, but no one asked you about
Gosh,
those
and
things.
did they know about this? How important it is? We know about nowadays. It's
Not
so
really.
Dyslexia is linked to
Not
that.
really.
And loads of problems.
It was very. It sounds so strange now, but it was very new then. And so, and then all we did was just work. We did our semi-supine lying down. We moved our arms, but it was how you moved your arm. Everything was very slow. Nothing was fast. And of course, we always were working on our breathing. Mine was
you
terrible.
held your hands.
Our breathing, the breathing. He was, sometimes people called him the breathing man. They had, you know, and slowly, you know, your body is very wise, and if you give it a chance, it starts to sort itself out.
And he used to say,
I
have
time.
time.
I have time. I have time. And he used to say, you have time, Jane. Paste it in your hat. You have time. Don't rush this.
You've never been with me, you see.
It'll take as long as it takes. And you're all different.
But it is interesting that there is time.
Yes. Yes, it
And,
was.
and maybe that's something that you said, you know, this is where I belong. And you've been able to take on things and hold them with you.
Yes.
And I think that's been a kind of your savior in your life.
Well, I think it has. It has, because you know, in between that time, I was married, as not many people do, is that I'd had my children, and then my husband and I were out, and we had an accident, and he died at the wheel. So suddenly, before training to be an Alexander teacher, I'd had to revamp my life with 2 tiny children, and with a lot of help. So it was extraordinary, and I was very lucky at a very sad time.
So body work has been able to give you a core of yourself, and that's what.
Yes.
And then you realized later on, if we go to the so-called third chapter of your body journey, which is of course not that simple at all, but you found out something about your legs and feet.
Yes.
What happened there?
Well, I was getting on quite well, and I worked in the hospital, and then I was having a bit more time out, and then I had heard about the work that Marja was doing. I'd seen her little advert in the swimming bath. And I thought, written that down, I thought, it was in Richmond where I live. That might be quite useful sometimes. I had no idea why. But then I put it down. And then moving all around that time, I started to find it quite difficult to walk. So I trained, everything was going fine. I had my own pupils came to me in my house. So I worked very hard, and I loved it. I had a place at the top of the house. And so that was all going very, very well. And I've lost my train of thought.
Well, anyway, you found when you came to me.
Oh, yes,
that's
right. Just before I came to I had these big boots on. Because what they found out, I was sent to the doctor, I was referred then to a neurologist and a foot specialist, and he said, the front of your feet is just not developed right. Everything, I don't know how you've managed so long. I said, well, I wasn't very active, and I wasn't a ballerina, so I think I just trotted along. And he said, well, we've got to operate on your feet, and so we'll do them both together, because if you have one done, you'll never want the other one done. So I had them both done, and then so the front of my toes is a lot of metal, both my feet, and that works pretty satisfactorily.
But in a way, all this interlinked, that first of all you were drawn into physio naturally, you were looking for the answers already, then you hit the fact that you haven't been crawled, of course, because that's when your ground point does the work. And it resulted to something far more. So nowadays, I think we would know this earlier.
Yes.
We would know it when the child, and same applies to me in a way. That
exactly,
you know,
except for you too.
If I would have been rehabilitated in 2 weeks of accident, and now it took the whole method. So here we are.
Yeah, the same.
We're not developed at all, but we are developing.
That's right. So it's hard to understand, because medicine, not that long ago, was so different.
It's
There's
such
so much
a short
research and
period
so
of
much to be
time,
done. Yeah.
isn't it? So basically the point of balance would have been needed earlier. And that's and how long ago was that? You've been with me now
Oh,
20
20-something years.
Yes.
I came into this room and stood, and Mario wasn't there that day. Someone else was there. And I thought, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And then I knew again. I knew I was in the right place.
Yes, and it's been very good for me. So thank you very much, because Jane has been one of those few people who understood what I do. But in terms of interpreting it with the language that was useful and important for me, because I wasn't English speaking. And in a way, we developed this conversation, and now we are reaching the level of energy.
Yes.
And the energy is something that we can call anything about energy, but it is a very real, and it's wonderful to hear you talking about the energy. So you have something you want to really share. You said something quite strong about how we all are. We should, how should we direct our energy?
Oh yes.
Yes.
I think what I feel is that we are we can have as many classes. We can puff along doing running. We can do all these things. We can go to the gym until we're half dead. But actually, you've got to reflect in your own body what you're up to and what this is doing, and is it helping or is it not, or is it just something that you do because you think you're going to get fitter or whatever. And I feel that I've got a privilege of having worked with this, but that we're all responsible for how our energies are directed at the end of the day. Now, with the help that we get, and whether we are conscious of it or not, you have to learn to redirect your energy.
So you described it that in a way, because it's hard to know where it is, because it's everywhere in a way, and you said that if we don't direct it, if we don't share it, we're exhausted.
We're exhausted, yes. We're running around in circles, really. You have to go. I always call it when you think, oh, what am I doing? Just pause and go on your back foot. I mean, that is a saying, going on your back. You go on your back foot, you just stay there a moment, and then you think, oh, yes, okay.
So connect to yourself.
You're connecting to yourself. Yeah.
And you said that this is simple. So we have a little bit more simpler tip from Jane. Because you've been blessed with Jane really has a very, very rich life in terms of people you met.
Yes.
And one of them, of course, has been, I need to include her, Estee Lauder. And she used to come to your shop, didn't she?
Yes,
my
first husband who died. This was and then I subsequently remarried, and so went from being an only child with 2 children to now having a sort of menagerie. Yes, so what I used to, my first husband was wonderful, and he was part of a store in London, in Bond Street, called Phoenix. And so for a lot of my life I was actually Jane Fenwick. And I used to often wait to meet my husband out, or I'd hang around, to be honest, in the cosmetic department because I quite liked it, at the end of the day, waiting for him to appear whenever. And Estee Lauder, who many of you will have heard of, or you will have seen her products being sold, she was, well, this would then have been about, what would it have been? It would probably be when I was about 70s, 60s, 70s. She used to come because the big offices were just round the corner. She used to pop in always through the store to just sort of sniff around and see what was happening and etc. By that time of day, most people had gone. There were very few shoppers coming in, and she was quite elderly then, and she wore a little hat always on the side, and she was small, but very bustly. And I never really spoke to her, got to know her really well, but I think she realised maybe I was working in the shop, I didn't know. but I was hanging around there. But she had this lovely thing, which you might think sounds rather presumptuous, but she did so well, is that a young girl, for instance, might be coming home. Oh, she was calling in the store because she thought, oh, I want to get a new lipstick because before I go out tonight with my boyfriend, or I've got no face cream, or whatever. And all the counters then had stools outside because people used to sit on the stool by the counter and have your makeup put on. And so she would perhaps just say to one of the young girls or whoever was walking past, excuse me, and they'd look a bit shocked. And then she'd say, I have quite a lot to do with this stall here, and I'd love to, could I just take a moment of your time? If you could just sit on the stool. Are you in a hurry? Because she was elderly and she was also very sweet. The next thing, they were sitting on the high stool, and she was putting a little bit of makeup on, very little bit of makeup on. And then she held the mirror to their face, and they would actually perk up quite a lot because they looked actually rather good. And then she would say, darling, everybody should do themselves up a little. Just remember that.
Do yourself up a little.
Which,
So in a way, directly we are responsible to direct our energies. But maybe, Lisa, can we start from making ourselves up a little? Because I think
Yes,
Lisa
we
can
can.
put our hands on the diaphragm.
we can do that.
And we can say there is time in time, and all
Yes,
there is time, like Walter said. And of course, I learned from Walter that if you, all of my face exercises, the nose is the
Yeah.
most important.
Yeah, the most
you know.
important.
And
the
of
most
course,
neglected.
the posture is from
Yeah.
Alexander. But I think this touching also is an interesting, because of COVID time, can we touch the energies each other? And
It's
so
hard. This period has been
Yeah.
quite hard.
Yeah, but we learned.
But we've
We
learned.
can feel the energy and we can touch each other. So, Lisa, do you want to show us? Do you put yourself up a little? Do you have
Up
a nice
a little.
lipstick there?
Yes,
To show?
thank you, lady. I'm so inspired, and because I have time. My lipstick now.
Oh, that's very nice. And what did she used to say? Oh, you look lovely.
No,
darling.
she used to say, everyone can do themselves up a little.
Yes, and then she used to say, you look lovely, darling.
You look lovely.
Thank you for just
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
This was wonderful. Have a lovely
Okay.
weekend.
And you.
Freeze.
Summers come, summers go. This one's very special though. Let go of what you think you know, and you can put